morning, everyone. My name is Frederick Moore. To my immediate right is obviously Kenneth Walker. To his right is Mr. Stephen Romans. Steve and I have the distinct honor and privilege in representing Mr. Walker. Behind us are his mom and dad, Mr. and Mrs. Walker. As I'm sure everyone is aware today, we filed a complaint for declaratory and monetary relief in Jefferson Circuit Court. Rather than have a bunch of different interviews, we thought it'd be prudent to just do one here and answer a bunch of questions. So we're going to begin by Kenneth reading his statement. He's not going to answer any questions, but after that, Steve and I will answer some questions. All right? But
good afternoon, everybody.
all right. Speak a little louder.
Good afternoon. Of course, my name is Kenneth Walker. My life changed forever in the early morning of March 13th. I was laying in bed with Brianna around midnight watching a movie. All of a sudden, someone started beating on the door. They refused to answer when we yelled, "Who is it?" 15 minutes later, Brianna was dead from a hail of police gunfire, and I was in police custody. The police arrested, jailed, and charged me with murder of a police officer. I was raised by a good family. I am a legal gun owner, and I would never knowingly shoot a police officer. Brianna and I did not know who was banging on the door, but the police know what they did. The charges brought against me were meant to silence me and cover up Brianna's murder. For her and those that I love, I can no longer remain silent. Thank you.
Thanks, Ken. So we'll take some questions.
Any questions?
You mentioned in the complaint that I read today that it's possible that, or most likely that based on the ballistics, that Kenneth didn't shoot the officer, that it could have been.
Well, here's what we know based on the 911 calls from neighbors and the police transmissions. There were two separate volleys of gunfire that night, and they were about 1 minute and 8 seconds apart. It was not reported that an officer was shot until after the second volley of gunshots. And yet the police have alleged all along that Kenneth's one shot somehow hit Officer Madigan. We absolutely do not concede that fact. It is obviously possible, but until we see the ballistics report and reflects that, then we think it is much more likely that one of the 35 to 45 shots fired by LMPD is what struck Officer Mattingly, especially based on the fact that it was not reported that he was shot until over 1.5 minutes after the raid began. So that is part of what we believe right now. But really, the bottom line on this is on that night, Kenny Walker was 27 years old. He's from a good family. His father's retired Army. His mother's worked for JCPS. Kenny never been in trouble in his life. And the police want you to believe that at almost 1 o'clock one evening, he says, my first foray into the criminal justice world, I'm going to try to shoot a cop. It's a ridiculous position. What is more believable is they didn't announce they were police, just as a dozen neighbors said, I never heard them say they're police. And then after this goes bad, they have to say, oh, we said we were cops and he had to hear us and therefore he shot us. That is the inherent inconsistency that throughout this case, that it began when Kenny was charged and it's still today. It is simply not believable. And they knew it wasn't, yet they went ahead and charged him anyway. That's the bottom line on this also is, it is still 6 months later and they're trying to determine what happened in that apartment. They arrested Kenny for what they say happened after about 3 hours. The reason why is because that fit their narrative. And using the criminal justice system to try to justify the shooting of Breonna Taylor is what this complaint is about. And we are watching it in real time every day. What we saw yesterday with the Glover plea is the same thing. And that is, Kenny can no longer remain silent about this, and that is the purpose of bringing this action.
Steve, you mentioned a little bit about that sloppy surveillance, about Mattingly going there ahead of time but not realizing that Kenny was in the apartment, or even Breonna's sister could have been there.
Correct. police report that they had surveilled the house and there was no one else there. I mean, there's a 6'3" gentleman who had been there all day. I mean, there could absolutely have been children there could have been anybody there. And when you're executing a no-knock search warrant and you've got guns and all these type things, you better know who is there. It is back to just the negligence and recklessness and sloppy nature of this entire raid. When they report that there's no one there and there's a guy sleeping in the bed.
Steve, you mentioned a lot in the lawsuit that Kenny was defending himself and Breonna, or at least he perceived that to be. He fired that shot. Do police officers also have a right to defend themselves in that situation?
Well, they do. Everyone has the exact same right of self-defense. Police do not have some sort of heightened right because they wear a badge. If you're in reasonable fear of your life, you are allowed to use self-defense. Okay? That is unquestionable. However, where that goes awry for them is when they recklessly are executing the warrant, then they don't have that right. When Hankerson is recklessly and blindly firing shots into the building, he does not have that right to self-defense. You can't just blindly shoot wherever and say, oh, I was defending myself, I was afraid. So that is where that no longer applies. Clearly, Kenny had the right in his own home. That cannot be disputed.
Can you speak a little bit about the trauma, humiliation, some of those things you say he's been going through over the last several months?
Well, like he said in his statement, I mean, he went from laying in his bed watching Freedom Riders to 15 minutes later, his girlfriend, you know, the love of his life, is gasping for breath in his lap. You know, he's calling 911. He's been shot at over 20 times, we know. It's pitch black dark. And then on top of that, he trusted the police officers of PIU who said, hey, we're just here to try to figure out what happened, told him the entire story, and less than 2 hours later, they've charged him and put him over there in the jail. So his entire life has been changed. Not only is the love of his life gone, right? And he has to deal with that. But let's also talk about the potential psychological effects of being shot at that many times in the dark. And the trust or lack thereof now for the criminal justice system and how they treated him. His name is all over the world that they've charged him with this. So that's just the beginning.
What was the catalyst to file this today? Right now, and why did it forward now?
Well, one of the reasons for the delay is, you know, because the Commonwealth has said, you know, insisted on dismissing the case without prejudice, we've always been concerned that they might recharge him. And if we brought this could be the impetus of them recharging him. At this point in time, we've decided we don't. If they want to charge him, charge him. We know where the courthouse is at. We'll litigate that case. But what that really also, the problem with that is if we do that, then what we're saying is when the police charge somebody wrongly and then realize it, or knowing all along, say, yeah, we're going to dismiss the case, oops, sorry. He's supposed to just say thank you and walk away. No, there has to be consequences to what they did. And we waited long enough. It is, you know, if they wish to go forward with the criminal case, fine, we'll deal with that too. But we couldn't wait any longer.
Why state court, not federal court?
Various reasons. That'll all come out over the course of the litigation.
Can you say anything about this white man that police were asking about inside the house? Why put that in there?
Well, because that was one of the things they continually asked Kenny that night, which goes back to just the recklessness and the sloppy nature of this raid. They think there's a white guy in the house. One person says there's no one there, and then they keep asking about, you know, where's the white guy out there? They didn't know anything. They say there's drugs there. There's no drugs there. They say there's money there. There's no money there. Everything that they said about this was false. And yet they just say, well, no harm, no foul. No, there has to be consequences. All right? Thanks, guys.
Appreciate it.